Alrighty, so today I am going to look at the 5 most surprising and disappointing team of the 2022 regular season, and I believe I've done this before where I do this every at the end of the regular season where I look at the most surprising and disappointing team. And keep in mind, I am only going to be listing these 5 teams not based on rank, but just 5 teams I think had a surprising season and 5 teams have a disappointing season, because I feel like every time when I do one of these videos, I usually never rank them, because if I rank them, then there's gonna be definitely some heated discussion in the comment section below, talking about why I probably are wrong by putting them as the most disappointing team this season, or maybe the most surprising team this season. But that being said, let us actually start with number one. And then number one, and actually I should be using a purple marker. Well, actually I'm going to go with the orange marker because I put my purple one on the other side. But we're going to go with CF Montreal as one of the most surprising teams this season. Now, obviously we knew that Montreal was going to be good this year. Like, we knew that after some of the signings that they made during the offseason, this team was going to be much better, but we didn't think that it was much better. In a way, they finished second in the Eastern Conference. Like I've said before, they're a team that could be secretly a dark horse team. It could be a team that make it to the playoffs and definitely make some noise. But I didn't expect with a Nazi team, which turns out to finish second in the Eastern Conference and have the best road record that any MLS team has had since the shootout era was over in MLS. But that's exactly what we saw in Montreal. And again, it was kind of the usual suspect. We saw up front, both Kyoto continue to generate the goals, and also, Kyoto is more like the one that scores the goal, and that Mihajlovic the one that is generating the goals, and are started to be becoming one of the best number 10 in the league, and the reason why he is going to be sold off for big amount of money to Europe this off season. But also in the midfield, it's also a very underrated midfield. I mean, I don't think a lot of people have given enough credit that Wanyama has done a very, very well with Montreal, and I thought he's been doing well for this team ever since he came in. And also the same goes with the back line, a back line that, at times, yes, it can be a little bit suspect, but for the most part, they've done a good job. And what's also even a big surprise about Montreal this season, that they were able to sustain success, is the goalkeeping situation. Because we don't usually see a situation where a team might have a revolving door in terms of the goalkeeping position, and that they don't really have a real goalkeeper and decide to kind of rotate both Pantemis and Breza in most of these games, that we would think that they would have some success. But that's exactly what happened in this, where again, it's still a big question exactly who is their number one goalkeeper. I mean, I think they're kind of now leaning a little bit toward James Pantemis, but I would not be surprised if Breza does come back into the fold in the playoffs. And again, it's very unorthodox. We don't usually see teams have success when they have a revolving door in the goalkeeping position. But yeah, that just shows you what Wilfried Nancy has done, and that, again, I really feel like ever since he came into this team, even when they didn't make it to the playoffs last season, he has looked really good and looked like a head coach that, again, a couple of years ago, we probably have not known that he could be a rising star head coach in MLS. And after this year, I think there is a case that is going to be happening, and especially he's probably going to be in the prime candidate of potentially winning coach of the year if he can continue to guide this Montreal team deeper in the playoffs. But now we go with number 2, and it's FC Cincinnati. So again, you knew that I was going to put Montreal and Cincinnati in that category, because Cincinnati, if you want to talk about probably the most surprising team this season, it's got to be FC Cincinnati. I mean, a team that has been a wooden spoon kind of team for the past 3 years. That the reign of error that they've been going through, where they have been a laughing stock ever since they came into MLS. But everything changed this season. And what's even kind of surprising is the fact that they didn't really change that much in terms of the roster until probably right around the middle of the season, where they did get some big pieces. But for the most part, when you look at this roster compared to last year, it's almost the same roster. I mean, they still have most of the players on the attack, like Lucho Costa, Brendan Vasquez, and Brent Brenner, and the midfield pretty much is still the same, and on the defensive side, pretty much for the most part, that is the same. But one thing that is not the same is the performance level. I mean, I talked about that front three with Acosta, Brenner, and Brendan Vasquez. Who knew that that front three would turn out to be one of the most deadliest front three in the league? And also the fact that Pat Nolan has really changed the mentality of this team and just kind of changed the way that, I think last year the reason why Cincinnati lost a lot of games isn't because of the fact that they sucked. Like, yes, there were some games that they just really sucked, but a part of that I think was just because of the fact that they had so many bad luck, and that when you of course suffer some of these heartbreaking losses, and if you suffer consecutively, it can definitely be a little bit psychiatric, and can really get into your mind that, well, here we go again. It looks like we're gonna implode once again. But it feels like Pat Nolan has no doubt stopped that kind of thinking and stopped that kind of mentality. The fact that, yeah, they're gonna just collapse on the end, because what we saw from Cincinnati is something that, again, we have not seen them throughout this season, which is a team that has been mentally tough and able to pull out big victories. When if you would have said that this was the case in previous season, those big win that they had, especially on the road, would probably be going to have losses. Now, that being said, there has been times that Cincinnati has gone back to their old ways, and they did suffer some heartbreaking loss on the way. And not to mention, this is just a day after when they got eliminated by the Philadelphia Union in a game where I wouldn't say that was kind of a heartbreaking loss, more of the fact that they just kind of simply got out quality by the machine that is known as the Philadelphia Union. But still, they should definitely should not let their head drop down. They should hold their head high up, because of the way that, again, this is a season. The fact that if you would have thought that this team would have made it to the playoffs in the beginning of the year, like if you told that to Cincinnati fans, they would think that you're just drunk or something. But again, this is a team that under Pat Nolan, again, another guy that I think is going to be in the running for Coach of the Year this season, and the philosophy that this team and also GM Chris Albright has really changed how this team, of course, is run. This is a team that I even say, when they got eliminated by the Union, don't be surprised they'll be back next year and competing for playoffs regularly. Because again, when you look at this team, it is structurally good, and that they can just maybe get rid of a little bit of some of the times where they still do struggle in terms of getting it over the line, and also not to mention fix that back line a little bit that is still a little bit suspect at times. This team can be an Eastern Conference contender in the years down the line. But now at number 3, it's going to be Inter Miami as the most surprising team. And what's surprising for Inter Miami, we talked about with the way that the sanction that they've been on, and that it feels like this year it's almost like an expansion season that Inter Miami is going through, pretty much completely blowed up the team this offseason and start from fresh. And I think what's the most surprising thing isn't because of the fact that most of those players that they of course got turns out to be enough for them to make it to the playoffs, but the fact that they can make a run in the second half of the season after started so poorly in the year. Like with the way that they started the season, it's understandable why many people didn't have a lot of hope, and there's a lot of people calling for Phil Neville's head, because again, it feels like this is going to be a long year where it's going to be the pain of, or the growing pains of dealing with a long, deep rebuild. But they absolutely turned it around in the second half of the season that I don't think a lot of people expected. And not to mention, who would have thought that Gonzalo Higuain would be a guy that he looked like he was a shadow of his old self for majority of the season, until the latter part of the year, where he really looked like the Gonzalo Higuain of the past. Like, he basically turned the clock back and really started to be the goal scoring machine that we know Higuain can be during his time in Serie A. So yeah, that was definitely a big surprise for them to make it to the playoffs, and as I said, they're way ahead of schedule in terms of this deep rebuild that they have gone through, and that there's no doubt that this team, I think they definitely have some pieces that they're going to continue to add into this rebuild. But the fact that they made it to the playoffs in a season that looked like it was a throwaway season, and after such a disastrous start, like not a lot of team can start, I think, the first 7 games in the season without a win and made it to the playoffs in the end. That just shows the character that this Inter Miami team, and especially the run that they had in the second half of the season to get them to that spot. Now, at number 4, I'm going to say Charlotte. Now, I know Charlotte didn't make it to the playoffs, and this is the only team that I think I put that didn't make it to the playoffs. But I think what's surprised about Charlotte is the fact that it looked like this was going to be a train wreck of a season for this team. Like from the beginning, we talk about the problem with the roster that they built and that they were really shorthanded in terms of that, and then the whole Miguel Angel Ramirez talk about they are truly screwed heading into the beginning of the season. That turns out to be a meme. And then, of course, you got the off the field situation with a couple of sporting director decide to leave the team because they were frustrated at how it's run. And then Miguel Angel Ramirez getting fired because he keep criticizing the front office about not getting enough players. And again, it was an absolute mess for the Charlotte team. And the fact that a lot of people would have said that this team would have finished dead last. I don't think a lot of people, including Charlotte fans, would think that's unrealistic because again, it was an absolute train wreck how they head into the season, and the fact that they not only didn't even came close to finish dead last in the Eastern Conference, it didn't match what FC Cincinnati had that disastrous start to their MLS life of winning the wooden spoon. This was a team that was competing for playoffs, and this was, I think, the other surprising factor is that every time when people try to write off Charlotte, they somehow find a way to get themselves back into the playoff hunt. And it's again, it is a huge surprise the fact that this team stay alive in the playoff run as long as they did, because coming into that daunting run that they had in the last month and a half of the season, nobody gave them a shot in terms of making the playoffs. Now, as I said, eventually they did fall short in the end, but the fact that they were able to take it to with just 2 games left, and even potentially take it all the way to decision day if they would have got that win against the Columbus Crew, I mean that just shows the character that the Charlotte team has had. And despite all the chaos that is going, this team is mentally tough, and even though they don't have the quality we've seen before, as long as if you're a team that is mentally tough and a team that believe in yourself and believing the head coach that whatever he is, which in this case for Christian Latanzio, I think he is started to become a guy that I think is kind of underappreciated of how good of a job that he has done, and I think that he's going to be most likely going to get a reward of winning the job. But yeah, this is a Charlotte team that if they can actually get some quality players in this team, who knows how good this team could. This team could simply be like Austin FC, where I think Austin FC was kind of in some way similar in the situation that Charlotte find themselves in. It wasn't the best expansion season, but they got some key pieces that could maybe hint that they could do well in the second season, and they did exactly that. Which, speaking of which, talk about Austin FC and Los Verde. That's where they are at. My 5th most surprising team this season. Again, for Austin, as much as I know in the latter part of the season where they went on that incredible run, and that there definitely was some key pieces that they can use to build in the second season, I didn't expect the fact that this team was just single-handedly a machine in the second season, especially in the first half of the season, where, my God, this team really surprised a lot of people with the way that they got themselves so high up in the standings. Now, obviously, I know the second half of the season has not been great for Austin, and some of the problem that Austin I thought kind of potentially had really started to flare up in the second half of the season, where the defense started to kind of show the vulnerability that we thought that it was going to be the case. But one thing that was not a vulnerability is the fact that this team, like Charlotte, they have a very strong mentality kind of mindset, and also that kind of never say die mentality. I mean, this is a team that, I even talk about heading into the playoffs, that they can't simply just keep going, find themselves in a hole in the beginning of the season and digging themselves out of it. And yet, in that game against RSL, they once again proved that they can do so, and that they've been kind of doing it throughout the entire part of the regular season. Like, this team must be leading the league in terms of the amount of comebacks that they have had in losing position, and as a result, that's why you got Austin so high up in the standings. And that, again, this is a team that if they can win against FC Dallas, they find themselves in the Western Conference final. And again, if you would have told me this is a team that, even with the talent that they had, that this team could finish second and find themselves in the Western Conference, I think that would have been just maybe being a little bit too optimistic, and just getting to almost downright kind of insane of saying that. But that's that's what Austin FC can find themselves in if they can get a win against Dallas on Sunday in that Texas derby. Now, in terms of honorable mention, I will give honorable mention to RSL, FC Dallas, and even the New York Red Bulls. For RSL, again, the honorable mention of being a surprise is because, again, with the squad that they had, it doesn't feel like that this is a team that should belong anywhere near the playoff picture, especially with the way that they lost some of the most key guys on the attack in Bobby Wood and Damir Krylak. It looked like it's lights out for RSL this season, and even when they looked like they were a team that find themselves below the red line, it looked like it was lights out again. But like last season, somehow in some way, Resort felt favored to them, and they were able to get a big victory on decision day to get them into 7th position. And it could have been pretty much deja vu all over again if RSL could have got that win against Austin FC, and they came close to doing so. Like they literally came with 3 minutes, and also just a brutal kind of handball that could have gone either way from potentially making it once again back into the conference semifinal. FC Dallas, another team that is surprised. I mean, in some way, I don't think people are kind of surprised that Dallas were able to bounce back, but the way that what is a surprise is the fact that some of the signings that they made for once actually worked out good, and it feels like losing Ricardo Pepi wasn't actually a big loss, because the guy that is known as Jesus Ferreira, he perfectly slot into that role and score even more goal than what Ricardo Pepi did. And then, of course, the New York Red Bulls, again, what is a surprise is the fact that, just as every season I feel like I have written this team off of the fact that maybe this is the year where they fell off, they somehow still able to get themselves into the playoffs, despite the fact that, when you look at the quality of this Red Bulls team, it shouldn't be a team that you would think that can be challenging for playoffs, and especially a team that have won so many of these road games. I think that's also a big surprise, where they play on the road, look like they're playing at home, and just how much of a bipolar of a season that they had. I think that alone, you would say, is a huge surprise for them having just such an abnormal year. But at the same time, obviously, we don't want to kind of have to mention what happened in the playoffs, where it's kind of the same old. But that being said, now moving to the disappointment category. The first team that is the most disappointing team, well, at least one of the most disappointing team, is Atlanta United. And again, for Atlanta, it's a year where it's disappointing in many ways, with the way that they had injuries that really kind of killed their team a little bit. I mean, losing a couple of key guys like Brad Guzan and Miles Robinson, and then so on and so forth, really killed this team. And then the Joseph Martinez saga that happened, and the dramas that was going on both on and off the pitch. And not to mention, once again, this is I think Atlanta is starting to show a prime example of what happened when you are at least showing ambitious in terms of spending, but you actually are not spending on the right players. And that, again, I don't know who exactly is the scouting department for Atlanta United, but I'm pretty sure they are probably in hot water right now, because it is unbelievable how much that they have spent throughout these past couple of years, and really ever since they came into the league, and how many times that all those signings turns out to be a huge bust. Like, besides the one that they got from Miguel Almiron, which they eventually sold off for big sum of money, and kind of started this trend of getting hidden gems from South America, develop them, and sell off to Europe. They have not been able to replicate that formula, and it's downright there. Even when they do sign some of the most well-known kind of South America player, like this season with Thiago Almada, he has not really produced anywhere near the record amount of transfer fee that Atlanta has had. So yeah, again, it's a huge disappointment with the way that, again, the philosophy that they're trying to do is clearly not working. But also add to the fact that when you have injuries, and also saga in terms of your most important player, it's not a big surprise. Eventually, this team kind of crash and burn and miss out on the playoffs. But the next team, I'm going to say the most disappointing, is last year's Supporters' Shield winner, and last year record-breaking Supporters' Shield winner, because the New England Revolution did finish the most point in the regular season last year. But this year, yeah, it has been a huge disappointment. And again, like Atlanta, they did lose some of their key players either to injuries, or they, of course, sold off to somewhere else. I mean, their biggest player that they lost this season alone has to be Adam Buxot. I mean, you can see once he of course left the team where he was really kind of the only legit goal scorer throughout the season. This team started to have problem in terms of scoring goals, and even over the season too, losing Tajon Buchanan, I think that's a huge loss with them losing the ability to really exploit the flank area and create some the chances. Now losing Matt Turner is only the one exception where it didn't really kind of hurt them, and in some way it kind of benefit them a little bit because Georgi Petrovic has been an absolute monster. But again, it's just the other thing that is disappointing for New England this season is just the underachievement that is going on. Again, the squad that the Revs have had this season, it's almost, I mean, if you minus those big players that they lost this season, it's almost kind of the same, but a lot of them really underachieved this season to a point where this team was unable to replicate the form that they were in last season, and kind of almost started to look like the New England Revolution of the old, where this team definitely has the talent to do well, but they just aren't able to get over the hump and eventually just miss out on the playoffs, which is exactly what happened to the Revs this year. Now, moving on, at number 3, it's going to be Toronto FC. And for TFC, it's kind of almost similar to what I say about Atlanta United. Most of the signings that they have made this season has kind of turns out to be bust. Although I will say that could not be the case with Bernardeschi and Insigne. I think they've been a key acquisition for this TFC team in terms of the attack. But notice how I said it's the attack and not the defense. And that, again, I've said this many times before, and I'm going to keep repeating every time I mention TFC and bring up this season. The downfall was the defense and the goalkeeping, and we knew that from the beginning, where the defense was going to be a huge liability and could be the downfall of them not making the playoffs. Guess what led to their downfall? Yep, it's the defense once again looking like a turnstile throughout the season, and then the goalkeeping situation with both Bono and Westberg not being a legitimate option, and as a result, you saw a TFC team that looked like they were gonna have a second half resurgence when they got the likes of Bernardeschi and Insigne. But once that defense started to give up goals at will, once again, there was just no coming back for this team to make it to the playoffs. And this is also why, again, as much as they have a lot of expectation heading this season of trying to get themselves back into the playoffs, the defense was going to be a huge liability, and that it was a huge liability, and eventually they missed the playoffs. But again, even with that, I think it's got to be a huge disappointment considering the amount that they have spent and getting a head coach like Bob Bradley that I thought at times it looked like it was going to be a smart signing because he has done so much good things for LAFC, and turns out that was not enough to even get themselves making it into the playoffs, and even finish, I think, even worse than what they did last season, because last year I think they finished like in 12 or 11. This season they finished like in 13th position. Now, at number 4, it's got to be the Columbus Crew. And for Columbus, again, the talent is definitely there. And the trend that I'm starting to put in terms of disappointment, where all these teams that missed the playoffs, they have talent on the attack. They have talent to basically get themselves over the line. But for Columbus cases, what's the downfall for them and the reason why they can't make it to the playoffs? Giving up late goals and fail to close out games. And again, I even mentioned the talk about how I mentioned many times with the Portland Timbers back in 2020, and the endless time I mentioned the fact that they have trouble in terms of closing game. Well, Columbus kind of probably saw what I said about the Timbers, and they decided to kind of amp up like maybe 5-fold in terms of the pain that Timbers fans suffer with their team failed to close out games in the 2019 and 2020 season, because my oh my, they were giving up goals late in the game at a record alarming kind of point. I mean, just one stat alone that just kind of sums up why the Crew had failed to close out game: 11 points drop after 90 plus minutes. That is by far the most that any team has had, not only this season but in MLS as history, and that it's not a big surprise. Eventually, they did let go of Caleb Porter because if you do drop points maybe there and give up late goals, it's gonna be disappointing. But maybe this is just kind of one of those times where maybe an unlucky bounce is falling your way, and next thing you know, you gave up a late goal. But if this does happen game in and game out, then it's not really just bad luck. The reason why you give up late goals and unable to close out game, and it maybe has something to do with the tactics and the way that the coaching staff set up to finish games. And whatever Caleb Porter is doing in terms of tactics and late in the game, I mean, it is just not working at all. I mean, just the amount of implosion that they had, especially down the stretch, they eventually miss out the playoffs, and also a fitting way for them to get eliminated on the final day of them yet once again unable to close out the game and gave up a late goal with a penalty. Again, it was just such a massive disappointing season in a way where, again, the Crew this year, for the most part, they haven't been a very decent team and haven't really lose a lot of games. But again, because of the blown leads, and also with I haven't even mentioned with the amount of points that they've dropped at home this season, combination of that, and it's got to be a huge disappointing season for a team that, again, you look at on paper, this should be a playoff team. Like, their defense wasn't actually that bad throughout this year, except maybe in the last 15 minutes of the game. And the attack, I mean, you have Lucas Ariad and Cucho Hernandez on your same team, you should be a playoff team. Like, it's hard to believe that both of these guys, that you have one that is considered one of the best number 10 in the league, and one that just came into the league and has really ripped the league apart throughout his first couple of months, and even some compared to him of when Joseph Martinez came to the league with Atlanta United. This team should make it to the playoffs, and the fact that they didn't has to be a huge disappointment. But now at number 5, speaking of the Portland Timbers, yeah, they're going to be at number 5 in terms of the most disappointing season. And I think what's disappointing for the Timbers is that they just aren't able to get that second half resurgence in a way where it got them over the top. And again, we talked about before where, the Timbers, we know that they always tend to sometimes start it slow, and that, it's good that eventually you might find a way to finish the season strong, and there was hint that was going to be the case. I mean, after that big Cascadia win, I think they wound up with 4 straight wins, and they were in a very comfortable spot. But unfortunately, in the last couple of games, that's when things kind of take a turn for its worst, and that again, I think that is only kind of the small piece of why the Timbers didn't make it to the playoffs. And that overall, what I'm trying to say is the fact that, you can only start slow so many times until it finally started to catch up to you. And that no matter, even if you make a crazy second half resurgence, maybe you're going to fall short. And in this case, that was kind of the case for the Timbers, where, again, they fall behind so many times. And that this is why I don't like the tactics of teams maybe sometimes might save everything until they make a late playoff push, because why can't they just do that from the beginning? And why do you just kind of find yourself fall behind the 8 ball and then eventually aren't able to kind of recover enough? Or maybe if you're putting so much pressure on you to get results, and if you don't, then it could take a huge playoff blow to your chances. And that's exactly what happened for the Timbers in this one, falling off for a slow start, just putting themselves in way too much pressure of winning these games, and eventually they kind of fall during the latter part. And that's also haven't even got to the part we talk about the off the field situation, that pretty much, I think the off the field situation kind of overlap in terms of what the disappointing this season that this season has been. I mean, if you talk to any Timbers fan, I don't think a lot of people will actually talk about the disappointment of missing the playoffs, but more the fact that the off the field situation, and that if there's one consolation, at least they finally got rid of their GM, and potentially their owner might be forced to sell the team. Now, in terms of some of the disappointing mentions, so these are the team that could have been mentioned in my disappointment. I'm going to go with Sporting KC here, the Colorado Rapids, and then let's see what else I put in the disappointment mention, and the Chicago Fire. Again, they could easily been in my disappointment mention against Sporting KC. As much as I know losing Polito was tough and losing Keemdout is tough, I didn't expect the fact that they just completely fell apart in the beginning of the season. And that, again, the only hope that Sporting KC fans have had is because of that incredible second half run that they had. That maybe they'll continue heading into next season. But again, if they would have made that run maybe early in the season, probably things would have been better. The Colorado Rapids, again, they just kind of returned to reality in a way where, that hard-working kind of Rapids team that we saw last season, it was nowhere to be found this year. And then, of course, the Chicago Fire, I mentioned before, despite the amount of signings that they made and bringing a new head coach in Ezra Henriksen, that I thought at times he done well for this Fire team, but at times where you can definitely question some of the tactical decision that he has, and also a team that maybe are expected that they, with the big moves that they made in the offseason, is enough to get them over the hump. They did. They're still back in that point, and still stuck in that point where they just become bottom dweller of the Eastern Conference for pretty much the past decade or so, except for that one good year that they had back in 2017. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for looking at the most surprising and disappointing team this season. As always, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all the team that I put in? If there's a team that I didn't put for the surprise and a team I didn't put for the disappointment on this list, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.